Howdy, y'all. It's Angela. Today we're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi and ballot harvesting. And where the hell did this come from with her, right? It wasn't something anybody was talking about on a national level prior to COVID. Obviously, she's going to, take advantage of every catastrophe and every, disaster. You can't for their stripes. There was nobody talking about this. She came back full force from her freaking shiny-faced vacation. And by the way, everybody's freaking about her getting a haircut. Come on, people. I pulled this up. When she came back, when everybody else was in Washington trying to work on, the Republicans were in Washington trying to get stuff done, and she refused to come back, and then she came back looking like that, and she was all shiny-faced. How come nobody commented about her having a facelift? Clearly, she had a facelift, and she was wearing all the goopy stuff, and guys, come on now. Yes, the hair salon thing is infuriating, and it's infuriating that she's, being such a small person and putting this woman's life out. Ugh, anyways, but she had a facelift. I don't care what anybody says. Anyways, moving on. We all know that ballot harvesting is dangerous, and even in California, where they had it introduced the law in 2016, there's been problems there. Well, this LA Times article from December 2018 doesn't go so far as to agree. As you can see, no Republicans didn't lose in California because of ballot harvesting, but the practice is concerning. They go so far as to admit it's concerning, even in the headline. But if you go further down, it says, but, and this is an important but, the Democrats set themselves up for exactly these kinds of allegations when they pass what really is an overly permissive ballot collection law. It was written without significant safeguards, and suspicions of abuse are inevitable. To reiterate, the fact that they feel the need to reiterate really sort of emphasizes they're not agreeing with Republicans. But there's absolutely no reason to suspect fraud in last month's election, not through ballot harvesting, they put in quotes, or in the large number of provisional ballots turned in, or how long it took the ballot count. Okay. So, as Paul Ryan so irresponsibly suggested, again, this is back in 2018, the ballot collection law passed in 2016 does open the door to coercion and fraud and should be fixed or repealed before the next election. Before the law was passed, only a family member or members of a household were authorized to deliver a ballot on behalf of a registered voter. That makes sense. Even there's some, but you're less likely. But AB 1921 relaxed those rules, allowing others, including canvassers, campaign workers, and anyone else to solicit voters to fill out ballots and deliver them. How is that not just right for every sort of fraud possible? This is insane. And they know this. This isn't something new because, going back to this article right here in DNA, it's DNAinfo.com. It says Chicago and rigged elections. The history is even crazier than you've heard. I'm not going to get into the whole background. I will say one thing. What we're looking at, people always talk about the Kennedy election or how Kennedy stole the election and Joe Kennedy paid the mob and this, that, and the other thing. And it's debatable. Some people say there's no evidence. Some people insist it's true. Here's my take on it. I don't think they would have needed the mob. I believe that the machine in each of these major cities was powerful enough. And if you don't know what a machine is, the political machine is it operates in the major cities. There have been Republican machines, but by and large, they're Democrat. And if you think about them, you think about Tammany Hall, you think of Richard Daley, you think of Honey Fitz, John Kennedy's grandfather. These are old-run machines. There's a machine boss, and there are ward bosses, and their own little fiefdoms, but they get together, and they have a sort of common cause, and, a brotherhood of the community. They are very sort of, they are very tribal and the ethnic, I would say. And I don't mean ethnic in a nasty way, but back when the immigrants came in, they needed somebody to sort of, connect with in this new country where so often they didn't speak the languages or whatnot. And political people, running for council or running the ward would come along and they would help them. They would get them jobs. They would introduce them to people. They would find them places to live. And, sometimes they were altruistic, sometimes not so much, but it helped keep the unity, and that helped keep political power, and it sort of grew. Those grew into political machines, ward bosses, so on and so forth. Nancy Pelosi grew up, her dad was one of the ward bosses who grew up into be sort of a boss. He ran Little Italy, which is sort of why it's so infuriating to me. If I was in Baltimore and they were tearing down the Christopher Columbus statues in my neighborhood, I would be so infuriated by her comments that she doesn't care about statues. Her dad was sort of an icon in that community. He helped people. I'm not saying he was, believe me, I've done enough digging into Tommy D'Alessandro Jr., and we're going to get into some of it, but she is the antithesis of what her dad was trying to build. It's really unfortunate. It's also unfortunate, too, because, with what's going on with Israel, and what the president's done with Israel and the inroads he's made with the United Arab Emirates and the airline and the flights and whatnot. Many of you probably don't know this, but her dad actually bucked his own party, FDR, when he was a congressman, and also Truman, to aid the Jews in Israel. He really felt, because Italians had been oppressed, in Catholics had been oppressed in Italy and during the war and whatnot. He really felt for the Jews, and he felt that they deserved a lot more attention from our government and a lot more assistance. And he signed on with, it's actually on her Speaker of the House website. It's really infuriating to me. It's speaker.gov. It says, Jerusalem Post, Pelosi's father bucked FDR and Truman to aid Jews in Israel, April 12, 2017. He was one of the congressional supporters of the Bergson Group, a maverick Jewish political action committee that challenged Roosevelt administration policies on the Jewish refugee issue during the Holocaust and later lobbied against the British control of Palestine. Can you imagine what her father would say to her today? Shame on her. Shame on you, lady. Shame on you. But I digress. So going back, her dad was part of a political machine. That's how they kept power. He was in Baltimore. He old school with people like Jack Pollock and a whole bunch of others that it's not worth getting into. Fact of the matter is, they know. They know. And it says right here also, there was one era, if I can find it. If not, I can't find it. Oh, okay. In light of November's victory, again, this was in 2018, the Democrat-controlled California legislature may be reluctant to tinker with the law that might have contributed to its victory, but it should do something nonetheless, because failure to do so might jeopardize wide-scale adoption of election reforms over the next year. Only 6 of 58 counties, including Los Angeles, starting in 2020, have committed to adopting the new reforms, including the state Voters' Choice Act. As long as ballot harvesting continues, other counties may be understandably hesitant to participate in the new system, in which mail ballots will be sent to every voter. That's millions of opportunities missed. Think about this. They're admitting what they're doing. They're admitting the flaws in it, and they're admitting that even in California it was too lax. And she wants to take these same rules and laws, as lax and weak as they are, and she knows it, and apply them to us. We know why that is, folks. She thinks we're dumb. But what gave her these ideas? Why is she pushing so hard? Well, she's pushing so hard because she knows it works. She's part of the machine. Here are a few tricks of the machine. Watch. The electoral rolls are supposed to be kept track of who registers to vote. The rolls would be rigged so dead people's names will still appear on the rolls. Crawford said, meaning others could vote in the candidate's name. Sometimes people working for the machine would even go into cemeteries and take names off a headstone or tombstones and fill out a registration card and vote in that person's, and they would send somebody live to vote for that in that person's names. Election judges were supposed to be keeping an eye on fishy antics at the polls. Republicans had such a small presence in the city, though it was difficult to find Republican volunteers. Democrats would pretend to be Republicans or would pretend to be volunteers, and meaning there were actually 2 Democrats at polling places when there was supposed to be 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. Officers providing security got their jobs from the machine, and they weren't going to say anything. People were promised $5 and a warm meal or a drink at a local pub if they voted for the right person. Sometimes precinct captains stole a ballot, marked it, and gave it to someone to turn in as they came in. That person would bring in a blank ballot, and they'd be given the polling, so they'd switch it back out. An old sewer boss named Ed Quigley once told Crawford he had a special way to make sure people voted the right way. He would basically inform them. He would watch their feet under the curtains. No Republicans to watch for suspicious activities in the precinct. The Democrat precinct captain would just vote for the person who didn't come in. Ward committeemen would go to nursing homes and help seniors marking absentee ballots by holding the voters' hands. Nursing homes would cooperate because they needed good relationships with the city, which inspected them. Sound familiar? It's all a circle jerk. Everybody makes the world go round, right? As long as it's voting in the right way. But this was so pervasive that after Daley's death, the machine, the power gradually began to die down. In 1983, Harold Washington created the city's first Freedom of Information Act laws, and it allowed journalists and others to obtain and analyze records. Independent reformers also filed complaints in federal court, and judges ruled that they should be able to observe precincts on Election Day. The new set of eyes from those 2 changes made a huge difference because officials couldn't hide as much. Crawford said that a Tribune expose into fraudulent registrations won them a Pulitzer Prize in forced city reform. That was... Anyway, point being, Nancy knows all these tricks. They are part of the machine history. They are part of what it is. Her dad is an old school machine king. She knows these rules and laws. LA Times is admitting before Corona happened that there are problems, not acknowledging that that anything actually has happened or any Republican might be right, but the appearance is there. So interesting. Here's something even more interesting to me. We've talked a little bit about why she's pushing this, that, and the other thing, but look, I want to dive into another aspect of Nancy, and that's the tactics here. This is fascinating to me. I had started digging in way back when into her dad's mob ties, and I came up with some different conclusions that had been reported, and it was a very complex, intricate story for me to cover on my own. I couldn't get organized. However, I have a whole ton of thoughts on it that do connect to other things. One of them being coercion. Nancy is not above coercing people. Look what she's doing to this hairdresser, right? Again, her shiny face, but look what she's doing to this hairdresser. Back after Kennedy won in 1960, he was considered for the position in the Kennedy administration, and they did some vetting. They found some stuff in the background. They found some communism issues that we could talk about that another time. They really weren't anything. There was some mob stuff that's been covered, but there was also the stuff about her brother. Her brother, Franklin Roosevelt Kennedy, was charged with raping multiple young women. 2 young women, ages 11 and 13, along with multiple friends. I want to say either 8 or 9 of them, and they did it several times. This was not a one-off event. He got his trial separated from the others, because his dad was mayor. There was a change of venue. The others were all found guilty. I will stress right now, her dad did nothing to help him. He got the attorney to cover him, to represent him, who was a retired judge and an excellent attorney by all accounts. But her dad was so appalled and so disgusted. He sent him to jail forever. I don't care. And he basically went missing for 6 months or so. He basically had a breakdown over this. This was a hard thing for her dad to take. So I don't want to cast aspersions where they're not due. But again, by all accounts, her brother was found not guilty because of a good attorney. He was charged because of that trial where he was found not guilty of the rapes and whatnot, with perjury, because Jack Pollock, another member of the machine that was mentioned in the Kennedy notes, Jack Pollock lied on the stand, and I guess the young D'Alessandro boy backed him up, but they were both acquitted on those charges as well. So I didn't dig enough into the perjury charges. It wasn't that big a deal to me. I'm sorry. But anyways, so they dug into this, and it was, for whatever reason, agree, disagree, he was cleared by the powers that be within JFK's administration, and he did get an appointment to a cabinet position within the not a cabinet position, excuse me. It was a contract bidding sort of purchasing position within the Kennedy administration. So here's young Nancy, this beautiful young girl who looks a lot like Audrey Hepburn, would go on to absorb and deploy all of the evil of her childhood upon this country. Here's the page. It basically says everything I just told you. However, the United States Senator stated that he would hesitate. Okay, sorry. The D'Alessandro Jr., but his son was one of a number of individuals. This is from the Kennedy assassination documents that Trump had declassified. It says D'Alessandro's son Franklin Roosevelt was one of a number of individuals charged arrested on a rape charge in 1953. He entered a plea of not guilty. He was subsequently tried for rape and perjury and found not guilty. Sources stated that although there was rumor that some sort of pressure had been exerted to acquit Franklin Roosevelt D'Alessandro, he had no knowledge of such pressure and stated that it was the consensus of opinion he was found not guilty because his case was handled in a brilliant fashion by one of Maryland's outstanding attorneys. Okay. So, and then he was given it was kind of funny because somebody was asked if they would consider him trustworthy for a position within the Kennedy administration, and it said they'd be hesitant to recommend him for an office where he would have to award contracts without having to be supervised, because there is some corruption there, and he was well known for it. Okay, so moving on. This is where something happened. But the mayor of Baltimore, Mayor Tommy D'Alessandro, when the chips were down, he didn't work to help me line up the delegates. So we were actually lost the state conventions to Humphrey. So that Humphrey came out of Maryland convention with most of the votes, as I recall. So, but from what I understand, there wasn't much reason to expect that otherwise from the beginning, was there? There wasn't, but just the same, we had a shot. If little Tommy, the mayor of Baltimore, had been willing to bite the bullet. That's little Tommy. Big Tom was dad, was Nancy's dad. Little Tommy was Nancy's brother, who was the later mayor. Had been willing to bite the bullet, and had made all out effort. I believe we could have carried the convention. If we'd had gotten 8 or 10 more votes, we could have carried otherwise, because I worked hard, very hard. Well, D'Alessandro was one of the few who did not go along with he stayed away from going as an instructed delegate. Well, he was for us, you see. We had an organization for people who were for us, and he wasn't willing to. And as I say, he wasn't willing to work. Had he been willing to work. Sorry, God, had he been willing to work, we might have had the convention. Although, as you say, we had no reason to think we would if you study the structure of the background. They did concede uninstructed delegates in a sense. What I've based most of my information on was the black book that was kept by Kennedy people in the boiler room. Tidings. The what? Green. They call it the black book. It's their fact book on the state. That's where most of the information comes from. So I could be very far off. But I understand there was a lot of White House pressure on D'Alessandro. Listen. Do you remember? That could be why he didn't do anything. Matter of fact, Green, that he had said he would go with you as long as the pressure didn't get any greater. I was wondering what form that might have been. That was Green. Tidings said, well, that could have been model city funds. He kept his summer program going. You know, things that, yeah, that's probably true. Green. In fact, there's something that supposedly took place at the White House. I've seen 2 reports. One from D'Alessandro, one that D'Alessandro went by himself in secret or in the shadow of the night, and the other that Jay Mallard, Taz, and George H. Hawker, and that they were threatened by William Marvin Walton to cut off funds if the delegation didn't deliver. Could be. It's not beyond them, but does it ring a bell? Of course. Fred Harrison, because now we've established that there was something. They had him up in the White House in the dark of night. What the hell is that all about, right? It was the sun. That's interesting. But who is Marvin Watson? Marvin Watson was an advisor to President Johnson and was Postmaster General, interestingly enough. So he was his closest advisor. He had actually requested in I personally think what happened was there was some pressure put on to the D'Alessandros because of their past that basically had been, covered up and not well publicized. But the sitting mayor, being Nancy's brother, sitting mayor at the time, it was a little bit more pressure than maybe he wanted to deal with. And what am I talking about? In 1966, before 2 years before the delegation, before the Johnson team before he was invited up to the White House in the dark of night and pressured, this was pulled up. For whatever reason, the Johnson administration, the Honorable Marvin Watson, special assistant to the president, pulled this up. And what the information was the result, he wanted all of the information that they got from the vetting process of Tommy Sr. during the JFK appointment. But they also, here's what caught my attention. A copy of the communications has not been sent to the Attorney General. Well, why would that be? Unless they wanted to keep that in their pocket for later and intimidate people, maybe. The fingerprint files of the identification division of the FBI contain no arrest data identifiables with D'Alessandro the senior based upon the background information submitted, connections, blah, 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 blah. But what they did grab was her brother's arrest records and all of the trial stuff. It was humiliating, see, right here. He was one of a number of individuals arrested on rape charges in 1953, meaning her brother. I think the Johnson administration basically pressured them away from Bobby Kennedy because we know, never got to that, obviously, because Bobby was assassinated. But I believe that Bobby Kennedy, Johnson had it in for him in every way, shape, and form, and he pressured D'Alessandro family with this stuff. There was also some stuff that I think the family was guilty of in terms of not so above board business dealings, but I really do think it was this. I don't think the sitting mayor wanted anybody to really let it be known that his brother was responsible for raping 2 little girls repeatedly and then got off on it. Even if he was found not guilty, doesn't matter. It's bad optics, as you know. So there's pressure tactics there that Nancy is clearly not, that she's seen them used and she's not afraid to use them herself. This is who this woman is. She is duplicitous. She is self-serving. She's probably a bit of a sociopath. What do you think? Anyways, guys, this is my probably very disoriented video on Nancy Pelosi. As you can tell, talk to your kids about politics before somebody else does. Oh my God, nothing else could be more important at this point. Okay, like, share, subscribe, please. I'll talk to you later.